Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kyle Sullivan. I'm the Public Affairs Specialist for the Bureau of Land Management. Thank you for joining our webinar today. It's the first in a series of webinars, and this one's titled Get to Know the Rogue Forest Partners. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so if you have any questions during our presentations today, there's a Q&A portal panel at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead and click that and enter your questions for us, and we'll get to those at the end of the webinar. Belinda Brown, the Tribal Partnership Director for Lomacotsi Restoration Project, will open our presentation with a land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's a privilege and honor to be here today. My name is Belinda Brown. I'm the Tribal Partnerships Director for Lomacotsi Restoration Project. I'm a Jumawi Atsage Co-Selecta Band member and also Northern Paiute. Lomacotsi is a key partner of the Rogue Forest Partners, helping to lead forest restoration implementation. You will learn more about our role in the Rogue Forest Partners during the presentation. Through Lomacotsi's Tribal Partnerships Program, we are able to support the Rogue Forest Partners with the meaningful engagement of tribes and tribal communities with support from Meyer Memorial Trust Foundation and the Mills Davis Foundation. Lomacotsi has representatives of 9 tribal nations in our organization, and we are proud of this. The Rogue Forest Partners would like to acknowledge and honor the Indigenous people of the Rogue Basin through a land acknowledgement to begin this event. For more than 500 years, Native communities across the Americas have demonstrated resilience and resistance in the face of violent efforts to separate them from their land, culture, and each other. Land acknowledgement is a critical public intervention, a necessary step toward honoring sovereign nations and Native communities, and enacting the much larger project of healing and reconciliation. Also recognizing that Indigenous people, their tribal governments, and traditional communities are still here. The rural towns and cities of the Rogue River Basin have been built on Indigenous land, and we pay tribute to the Indigenous nations who have maintained the health and beauty of these lands through the careful stewardship of forests, waterways, fish, and wildlife. The Rogue Forest Partners acknowledges the ancestral lands of the Native tribes that lived in what is now called the Rogue River Basin of Oregon, including the original past, present, and future Indigenous inhabitants of the lower Rogue River Athabascan tribes, which include the Upper Coquille, Shasta Costa, Tututni, Upper Rogue River Athabascan tribes, including the Taltush Tuntati and the Dakapatati, Takelma tribes, Latgawa, Degelma, and the Klamath tribes tied to the Upper Rogue River watershed divide. The complicated history of colonization and forced relocation of the regional tribes resulted in the formation of several federally recognized tribal governments, of who we honor today, including the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Indians, and the Talawa Dene Nation, and the Coquille Indian Tribe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belinda. So today's goal is to provide an introduction to our group. This is the first webinar in a series that will continue on the first Thursday of each month. We'll explore more details of our work as the series progresses. And here's an overview of what our upcoming webinars are. On April 1st, we'll be discussing what a healthy forest looks like and the need for restoration. In May, we'll be describing where we are working, and in June, we'll talk about how we're tackling wildfire risk. We encourage you to keep in touch with us and visit our website at rogueforestpartners.org and sign up for our newsletter. And you can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram as Rogue Forest Partners. And then if you have questions, feel free to reach out anytime and email us at hello@rogueforestpartners.org. Now at this point in time, I'd like to welcome our panelists and our Rogue Forest Partner organizations and representatives to turn on their cameras and introduce themselves.
Hello.
Hold
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shane Jimmerfield, the Program Director at Lomacatsi Restoration Project. I'm here today with Belinda Brown, who you've met, our Tribal Partnerships Director, and Tom Greco, our Communications Manager. We're part of an over 60-person staff working across the region. Lomacatsi has been working in the Rogue Basin for over 25 years in partnership with federal, state, local agencies, municipalities, schools, and other nonprofits. And wherever we work, we seek meaningful collaboration with tribes that hold ancestral ties to the land. As the lead implementation partner in Rogue Forest Partners, we support the leadership team with our executive staff and bring our workforce training and education programs to this important forest, oak woodland, and riparian restoration in the Rogue Basin. We're happy to be a part of this partnership. It's a privilege.
Hi, I'm Terry Fairbanks with Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative. I'm the Executive Director. And SOFRC began, as many of you know, as the Knitting Circle in the early 2000s and has been active in the Rogue Basin collaborating on a variety of forest issues for the last 15 years. We work with many different organizations, including land management, state organizations, and landowners. As the coordinator organization for the Rogue Forest Partners, I really appreciate working with such a talented group of peoples and organizations. They never cease to amaze me with their knowledge and skills. Being the coordinator for the Rogue Forest Partner means being a point of contact, facilitating our core meetings, and keeping our organizational structure documented and reporting on our current activities. I look forward to implementation of the treatments and visiting you all in the field.
Good afternoon. My name's Elizabeth Burkhardt, and I am the District Manager for the Bureau of Land Management's Medford District. And my colleagues and I are here today as part of this partnership because this partnership is really well aligned with the Bureau of Land Management's priorities. Some of those include implementation of the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy, goals such as creating resilient landscapes, fire-adapted communities, and safe and effective wildfire response. We recognize that given the checkerboarded land pattern that we have here in Southern Oregon, no one entity can really do this by themselves. We really have to work across all lands and boundaries to create resilient landscapes. And this body coming together really provides that opportunity to do that when it comes to implementation. So thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jamie Stevens, the Science Director at Klamath Bird Observatory. We are a local, non-advocacy, science-based nonprofit organization. We advance bird and habitat conservation through science and education, working with a diversity of partners that are implementing land management on the ground. We are excited to be working with the Rogue Forest Partners on this critically important restoration effort. We bring the approach of birds as ecological indicators to inform forest planning and to measure ecological response. So whenever changes happen on the landscape, some birds are going to benefit and others are going to be hindered. And by measuring that response, we can provide another metric of understanding whether or not restoration is achieving both short-term goals, as well as whether or not we're getting our forest back onto a trajectory to achieve our long-term mature forest desired conditions. And we are implementing bird monitoring and associated vegetation monitoring specifically in the Upper Applegate Watershed project. This spring, before restoration, we'll be returning several years post-restoration to measure direct response. And then we're also applying this concept more broadly using a modeling approach across the entire geography of the Rogue Forest Partners restoration actions. Thanks for your time today.
Hi, my name is Donna Mickley, and I'm the Siskiyou Mountains District Ranger on the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. And I'm really excited that we're part of this Rogue Forest Partners. Partners are really critical to the Forest Service, and they help us in a number of ways. One is through the tribal engagement that Belinda's been really, really helpful for us on. Lomacatsi helps us increase work capacity. And the Nature Conservancy helps us with monitoring. And it's nice to be at the table with BLM where we work across boundaries and can work seamlessly. And maybe most importantly, this kind of partnerships allow us to leverage our funding. With the importance of doing fuels reduction and restoration work at a landscape, large-scale pace across multiple jurisdictions, these kind of partnerships are really, really important that we get this work done in order to protect communities. And just that being able to be strategic and pool our resources and pool our efforts. So I'm really excited that we're expanding our partnerships across the Rogue Basin.
Hi, I'm Kara Balog with Oregon State University Extension. I'm a program coordinator. Oregon State University Extension, we work with partners in communities and organizations within those communities to provide information, services, and expertise to meet local challenges that help Oregonians, particularly in natural resource management. I work as part of the Forest and Natural Resource College in Extension. And we often work with landowners trying to learn about the best management techniques, and then through education, whether it be landowner education or K through 12, we try to educate the public on those techniques. We are really excited to serve as a partner within the Rogue Forest Partners and contributing our expertise in landowner and community engagement. This project aligns perfectly with OSU Extension's outreach and education mission, as well as the goals of our new Extension Fire program to assist in developing and implementing strategic treatments that will reduce wildfire risk and improve landscape health. Thanks everyone for joining in.
Hello, my name is Chris Rudd for the Oregon Department of Forestry. We have a number of projects that we do that align really well with what's going on at RFP, and it's good to have kind of that cross-boundary relationship where we're all working together. Fires have no boundaries; they don't obey property lines, and so anytime we can do fuels mitigation and try and reduce fire hazard, working across all landowners is good. We value that cooperation. ODF does a number of grants, and we also have a number of projects on various lands, and RFP is a good implementer. So working together in a collaborative manner, there are a number of projects that have been successful in the area, working with other collaboratives, and we're happy to be a part of this and lend any expertise we may have in the area. We have some employees that work directly on these grants across all lands, and that's helpful for us. It helps us to maintain our work base and keep firefighters employed in the wintertime, and it also helps to reduce fire hazards, and it's just complementary to our mission in Oregon. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Darren Borges. I direct conservation forests in Southern Oregon for the Nature Conservancy, and we're a non-government organization. And many of you are aware of our work to protect the iconic Table Rocks, where we partner with the Medford District BLM. But since 2005, our focus has expanded to address the urgently needed forest restoration, especially for the dry forests in Southern Oregon. And we started our work in the Ashland Forest Resiliency Project, or AFR. And I'm grateful to see that work at AFR, which has become a model of public-private partnership, now being expanded across Southern Oregon by this Rogue Forest partner, our Rogue Forest partners. The Conservancy works to bring best science and to lead the multi-party monitoring for this highly effective partnership. I want to thank you all for being here.
And good afternoon. My name is Peter Winnick. I'm the District Conservationist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service here in Jackson County. And we're very grateful to be part of the Rogue Forest Partners. As everybody's explained, it's all about cross-boundary, it's all about leverage and bigger, larger landscape level projects. And our piece is working with the private landowners, which is really nice. We're able to provide technical and in a lot of cases financial assistance to help private landowners get fuel reductions work done on their property. And so we're just very grateful to be part of such a great partnership. Just brings a lot of technical, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of resources that we're able to leverage into with our resources. So really looking forward to moving forward as with this partnership.
So we have one more partner who wasn't able to be here today, though he really did want to be, and that is Cal Lee Davenport. And Cal Lee is with the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program, and he serves as the Private Lands Program State Coordinator. And he's all over the state, and you may have been in meetings with him. He provides program leadership in his role as a state coordinator for 9 additional biologists who work with private landowners all around the state of Oregon. His office is located in Portland at the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Office, and he fills the role of on-the-ground private lands biologist for the Rogue portion of the program's Rogue Umpqua Kale focus area. In this capacity, he often collaborates with private landowners and many of the Rogue Forest partners on a variety of voluntary habitat restoration projects. These include restoration for upland oak habitats, coniferous forest, stream wetland restorations, and dam structure removal. The ultimate goal is to assist a variety of different service trust resource species, such as the federal species of the northern spotted owl and fisher, oak obligate migratory birds, Gittner's fritillary, the Table Rocks and oak habitat restoration projects listed, and declining salmonauts, stream work with many of the local watershed councils and various pollinator species, working with the Understory Initiative here locally, who is one of the partners we often work with. He wishes he could be here today, and he got an opportunity to actually go in the field, and he could not forgo that. So more power to him. But he'd like you to know that if you have any private lands habitat restoration opportunities, or you'd like to visit with him about it, I'm not going to read you his email and his phone number, but if you contact us and put a question in the chat, I can relay that information. So thank you.
All right, I want to thank all of our panelists. As you can see, we have a great group of organizations and agencies working on a landscape scale approach to forest restoration and wildfire reduction. Next up, we're going to go back to Terry Fairbanks to talk about the value of collaboration and what makes this partnership unique.
Thank you, Kyle. And after I talk, Shane Jimmerfield will talk a little bit about our projects, and then Tom Greco will relay some opportunities for you to be involved. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the value collaboration and why are we working together. And you've heard a lot of it from our partners, but I thought I'd reinforce some of the things that you probably heard. The issues that we face in our forests are bigger than any organization or community can address. So that's probably the number one reason, and you've heard that. It's whether it's climate adaptation, fire risk to our communities, smoke, fuel buildup, threatened wildlife habitat. These issues cross jurisdictional, ownership, and organizational boundaries. Since fire is such a frequent visitor to our forests, and these forests have evolved and are shaped through fire, we rely on our tribal partners because some of their traditional knowledge and their use of fire, they knew how to provide wildlife habitat, promote food security, and ensure a diverse and productive landscape, and how to decrease some of the disease and even hazardous fuels. Since fires were suppressed for such long periods of time, it takes a tremendous amount of resources to fight those fires. We're not allowed to let them continue across the landscape, and I'm not sure that's at the rate that they are burning now, that we could do that. If they were low, small fires, low to the ground that you could manage, then we might be in a different situation. But that's not where we find ourselves now after so many years of suppression. The Rogue Forest Partners has a history of collaboration. Even though we came together just a few years ago, all of us have worked together in one combination or another on different projects. And what's great is the implementation experience of these partners. These organizations have been involved in land management and habitat restoration and finding ways to reduce risk to communities. You've met Lomocatsi Restoration, who is leading the way on implementation, ecological prescriptions, and tribal engagement. Both TNC and KBO play a key role in our monitoring effort, education, and prescription development. The land management agencies provide that analysis, decisions on products, and guidance, and Fish and Wildlife and the NRCS, who work primarily with private landowners and support implementation and monitoring in many different ways. ODF is also involved in land management, both with the U.S. with the U.S. Forest Service and on their own lands, but they also are primarily responsible for protecting the private land from fire. So OSU Extension is also a very valuable partner in working with communities and helping develop the Rogue Basin strategy and providing tools such as All Lands Map Explorer. The Rogue Basin Forest Restoration Strategy is what we rely on to guide our work, and it was developed collaboratively and has been vetted and is used to develop priorities for restoration. Our focus is in all lands, cross-boundary effort, and working with local communities and neighbors. Three important goals of this strategy are managing fire to benefit people and nature, protecting and promoting complex forests, and restoring open forests and reducing fuels. The strength of this approach is threefold. This reliance on a strategic approach means we have a way to prioritize our work when we go into any new project. And the demonstration projects, through implementation, we're able to get feedback from people about this work, and both professional and landowners and congressional folks and communities of what they think of this work and is it meeting their needs and objectives. And then engagement through review and field trips and conversation and outreach. We're just getting started and hope you'll join us to expand the shared vision, broaden our partnership with diversity, equity, and inclusion, demonstrate and highlight some of these successful projects, work to advance workforce capacity and community business infrastructure that's needed if we're going to implement year-round forestry restoration work. So thank you. Now I'll turn it over to Shane Jimmerfield.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so the Rogue Forest Restoration Initiative is an ecosystem restoration project. It leverages significant co-investment from the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board and the U.S. Forest Service. Other partners also bring important co-investment in terms of funding and staff time and expertise. And as the lead implementation partner, Loma Katsi has been working in close collaboration with the partnership and private landowners to design the projects. So over the last year and a half, we've focused the initiative in the Upper Applegate Watershed Restoration Project. Some of you may have been a part of that collaborative development. Also in the Upper Briggs Watershed Restoration Project and in the Williams Watershed. So Loma Katsi's technical staff has been conducting the pre-implementation monitoring, the design and layout of the projects. And we've been writing the prescriptions with our partners and the Forest Service and BLM, who, as we all know, hold the primary decision-making authority on public lands, certify those prescriptions. For the Upper Applegate and Williams projects, we designed over 550 acres of restoration work that enhances habitat while reducing fuels. The implementation phase of that work begins this spring. We'll be starting in Williams next week. Additionally, in the Upper Applegate and the Briggs projects, we've designed over 1,500 acres of restoration work with what we call commercial byproduct, that is logs to mills. These logs, they generate revenue that gets reinvested back into the project so that we can do more restoration work. And that work is expected to start this summer and proceed through the next couple of years. I mentioned that we're going to be starting next week in Williams, so I'd like to highlight a little bit more about that project. So the partnership is approaching the Williams project with, it's an innovative cross-boundary design. The plan, to the degree possible, seeks to implement with an approach that doesn't recognize the boundaries between the properties, just as fire and ecosystem know no boundaries. And so through this approach, we're designing a more holistic prescription and leveraging those efficiencies through implementation. So the design does consider past management across the project area and does comply with existing NEPA, which is the federal management policy. But it seeks, as I was saying, a more holistic approach with cross-boundary design and implementation. And the project is comprised of some BLM lands and 6 adjacent private parcels. The project is south of what is commonly known as Four Corners in Williams. And the design is complete and implementation will begin next week. And that's where Loma Katsi's seasoned restoration workforce will be on the ground with chainsaws getting things started. We're all very excited that after years of in the development phase and writing grants and leveraging and building this partnership, that some restoration work is on the cusp.
Thank you, Shane. Next up, we have Tom Greco talking about how you can get involved with Rogue Forest Partners.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. My name's Tom Greco, Communications Manager for Loma Katsi and part of the Rogue Forest Partners engagement team. And we want to keep you in the loop about our work and make sure you know how to get in touch with us with any questions or concerns you might have today or moving forward. If you're tuning in via Zoom, you can enter questions now in the Q&A box and we'll try to answer them momentarily. If we don't get to your question, please follow up with us and we'll do our best to address it. We encourage you to check out our website at rogueforestpartners.org. There you'll find a sign-up link for our periodic email newsletter and also a green Get in Touch button where you can send a message or ask a question. You can also email us, hello@rogueforestpartners.org. And please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram with the handle Rogue Forest Partners. Thanks so much for your time today.
All right, thank you, Tom. At this point, I'm going to ask all of our panelists to come back on, turn on their cameras, and unmute their microphones. And we're here to answer any questions that you have. I encourage you to submit any questions that you may have in the Q&A box. And one of those questions that came in during the last presentation was, would this group support reduced timber harvesting and consumptions? And so I'm wondering if anybody in the partnership would like to take on that question.
So this is Donna, and I might need a little clarification on supporting reduced commercial timber. What these partners are doing in the projects that we're working on here, this is based on fuels reduction. So there are commercial trees, there are trees that have commercial value that are removed as we thin the forest. I would say it's a byproduct of fuels reduction. So we aren't looking for timber for the value of timber. We are trying to make the landscape more resilient and a healthier landscape, whether it's fire, insect, and disease. And so that's really how our prescriptions are written and what our treatments look like. So the commercial components of these projects is a byproduct of reducing the fuels and thinning the forest. Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I think the question was in part getting to the historic levels of forest harvest. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge, and we all share this understanding, that it's a combination of historic timber harvest, really kind of focused on the largest trees, in combination with the absence of fire that's allowed the forest to grow up so incredibly dense, sometimes with 3 times or more the number of trees that would have been in stands naturally, and of course with all sorts of variation. And so, yeah, there's such a great density and such an even homogenization. So everything's kind of become even and dense. And the forest restoration practices that we're advancing begins to thin that out in key places so that the largest trees, which we leave, can then thrive and can tolerate in the future, maybe after some prescribed burning, they can better tolerate wildfire when it occurs. So I think the question raises a good point and completely consistent with kind of our thinking about the factors at play that have created the situation that we're in, where so much important work is needed.
Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would like to just kind of re-emphasize that as a partnership, what's important for us is that we come together around common values and common a common agenda, let's say, a common platform of ecosystem forest restoration. And that's where this partnership really gets its strength, that we have a common purpose. And it's not really, it would be challenging for this partnership to start taking stands like that. So it's not something we want to really do. We have some good common goals and we work forward on those.
All right, thank you, everybody. Maybe just to drill down to a project-specific question, and this seems to be in a general context, but what are your goals in a restoration project?
I'm happy to jump in.
Please do, Darren.
Thank you. It all depends. There are really important places like the deep, dark, rich, complex old growth that is the home of northern spotted owl, where we reserve those areas and let them continue to thrive. They tend to develop in really dark, moist, shaded, protected areas. But on the warm slopes and ridges that surround those areas, that have grown so dense that are having trouble even sustaining the lives of the trees that are there right now. That's the focus of our work, where our goal is to reduce the density, focused on reducing the number of the small trees, sometimes called thinning from below and often variably. And in so doing, along with removing some of the smaller fuels, thickets of shrubs, we literally change the fuel which can carry a fire. We ameliorate, we relieve the forest of the dense fuels, creating a profile that tends to support more of a mild fire. A fire which the largest trees with their thick bark and their higher canopies are well able to survive. And so in creating any one stand and then linking treated stands up along strategic areas on key ridges and around homes, as a buffer around some of these deep, dark, old growth spotted owl areas, we can begin to ameliorate the flow of fire across the landscape and begin to change the trajectory that the forest is currently on of increasingly severe, increasingly large fires. Instead, what we'd like to see would be more mild fires that are more manageable in landscapes where we have better options for managing the wildfire for the purposes of benefiting both the nature in the landscape, but also the people that live in it as well.
That was a great answer, Darren. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add on to Darren's answer? And if not, here's a good question. I'm a local tree service business owner, and sorry, Terry just answered that. So hold on, let me pull it up again. I'm a local tree service business owner, and I'm in the process of starting an NPO to help with fire mitigation, fire fuel reduction, and reforestation. I'm eager to get involved and help. Where would I get started and be of most use? And then there's also kind of a follow-up question to that, which is also, is there grant money for startup NPOs or profit businesses to join in helping with this vision? So Terry, maybe you can start with what you typed in the answer, and then maybe Shane, we could go to you next. And Terry, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, there. Hi, Luke, yes. Thank you for your enthusiasm and support for doing this kind of work. One of the things that Rogue Forest Partners has been involved in a lot is kind of landscape resiliency projects out in the forest, but we're starting to work closer into communities. And we're encouraging our partners and agencies to consider the work that needs to be done right around communities and looking at fire safety, egress and ingress. And it sounds like that's the kind of work that you could be involved in. There's one project that Rogue Forest Partners recently adopted. It's called the West Bear Project. We don't have a lot of information out on our website yet about it, but it's located just west of Talent between Ashland and Jacksonville. And it's working on private land and defensible space and roadside treatments, that kind of thing. So my suggestion would be, number one, finding communities that are embracing that work. And number two, looking for who has the grants to implement that work and seeing how you could be part of that process. Some of the grants, like through FEMA, the hazardous mitigation, are pretty horrendous the first time you look at them. So working with people that are used to those kind of grants is probably a first step, but there may be subawards and different opportunities. So welcome aboard.
I might just add that it's kind of like starting any other business. You're making contacts, you're communicating, you're advertising, but one way you can do that is get on a list of contractors. I know the ODF offices retain lists of contractors, and they'll send out if there's a project they're interested in getting a bid on, they'll send out those bids to people. There's a program called ORPN for Oregon Department of Forestry where you can get their announcements, and that's through Salem. And you can also probably do the same sort of thing with private companies if you were to contact them and just make that relationship and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this kind of work.
All right, Terry and Chris, thank you for that great answer. Next up, we have a question. How do you affect a forest harvest project to leave less of an impact?
So I'll just carry on my earlier answer that when we're doing forest health work to provide a more resilient stand and that commercial timber is removed as a byproduct, that's less impactful, and it's actually moving the stand and moving to the landscape to a healthier place. And the more areas that we can do this, the better, because certainly providing timber and providing material to local communities is part of our delivery as an agency as well.
I'll jump in. I think the key to diminishing impacts from forest harvest is a focus on leaving the largest trees and a healthy component of species diversity and size classes with an emphasis on those largest trees. So the impacts are already reduced because the trees that we're removing are smaller. And then we adhere to really strict forest protection standards in terms of the ground in which it's gentle enough that a tractor can operate on safely without causing erosion versus ground that's steeper when you've got to kind of lift the trees off using a suspended cable. Or in the case of Ashland Forest Resiliency, a lot of the commercial removal of the smaller trees was done by airlifting them with a helicopter. We absolutely want to leave a healthy forest floor and a situation that prevents erosion and really supports forest.
There was a follow-up question too that was, let me see if I can scroll down to it. How about commercial harvest? Can they leave the big trees? And I think we touched on this just a little bit. Curious, maybe Elizabeth, if you could talk about the size limits that the Bureau of Land Management has for commercial harvests.
Sure, we have, I'm going to refer back to the Western Oregon Resource Management Plan. I don't have my figures exactly in front of me today, but we do have limits on both the size and age of trees that are harvested in any of our projects. And I would also say with, just back to that larger question of how we reduce the impact of harvest, there are numerous steps, design steps, interdisciplinary team members design these projects collaboratively and can work collaboratively with this group. And also one of the unique features here is that we have an opportunity to work with folks who are going to actually be doing the work on the ground to design those projects so that we are doing surveys up front to avoid sensitive plants and wildlife so that we are reducing our impacts to soils on the ground. So there are a lot of steps that go into the initial design and prescription, both in terms of the actual trees that are harvested in order to, or material that is removed in order to reduce fire risk and promote resilient forests, and also to protect all of the other resources that are dependent on our forests.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Darren, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I'll continue on this thread if there aren't other important questions that we need to get to. But one thing I would like to emphasize for our audience is that most of the work that needs to be done in the Rogue Basin and guided by the Rogue Forest Restoration Strategy and all of these partners is non-commercial work. There aren't large trees or commercial sized trees that need to be removed. It's about thickets of brush, thickets of reproducing conifers, and there's, no trees being removed. The small material is typically, well, it might just be lopped and scattered, and then those fuels will be addressed in a prescribed burn as a follow-up, or they may be piled into a pile, which will be burned subsequently when the piles are ready. And an important distinction of the Rogue Forest Restoration Strategy and the projects which this group has taken on in partnership, separate from some of the projects that BLM does on their own or the Forest Service might do on their own. But when we're working together in this partnership, we don't have an expectation that any given stand, even if it has commercial trees, is going to generate a profit. We don't impose that expectation on the forest. Now, we may sell trees, and thankfully, when we do, we're able to recoup some of the cost that can defray the expensive treatment to do the fuels reduction. But we're not picking stands because they can generate a profit. We're picking stands because they need ecologically based forest restoration treatment. We may sell the trees, but we are not imposing an expectation that a project is going to generate a profit. And in fact, if you look at the projects that we've done already, they simply don't. We, in a public and private partnership, will have to continue to work to bring co-investors to help supplement the projects with funding in order to be able to afford to do the work. And part of the contribution will be some of the receipts we can generate, but it's not driven by profit. I can assure you of that.
So that does lead to a good question. And how is Rogue Forest Partners funded? Terry, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. I just assume that might be of interest to people. Right now, we're funded by projects. Our biggest project is the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board Focused Investment Partnership, which provided $6 million over 6 years, and there was about $2 to $3 million worth of match to that. Other projects are probably project specific as well. So we don't have any other funding besides what we're getting through specific projects. But we certainly would like to be able to continue this work across the landscape. So we're hoping that there is support to do that, because it's more than just implementing the work on the ground. You need to do good monitoring. You need to talk to people about what they're seeing and whether they think it's the right thing to be doing. And folks need support who are doing all of this work. So it's always a question how to continue, but the collaborative capacity, I think, is really important, because it's helping us to solve a bunch of these problems that we know all are there and that not one of us can solve independently.
And Terry, another question came in while you were speaking, that is, do you see opportunities to motivate that co-investment to fund restoration projects? And I think that was based on what Darren was talking about.
Yes. I would say that if we're successful, and this is the beginning of working with organizations and groups and individuals across the Rogue Basin in our communities here, I think there's the ability to coalesce around what needs to be done, how to meet some of these objectives, how to do it in an ecologically appropriate way, and to see the benefit benefited reduced risk. It would cost us less to restore and do some of this management work than it does to suppress even a single fire in a single year. So I think once folks kind of all agree on the scope of the program, problem, and what some of the potential solutions are, there may be several opportunities for investment, whether it's businesses or government or philanthropic organizations. So we look forward to those investments.
Thank you, Terry. I have another forward-looking, future-oriented question, and that is, how are you adjusting restoration strategies and tactics in the face of uncertain future conditions and ecosystem functional shifts due to accelerated climate change?
Go ahead, Darren.
Okay, thank you. What an important question. We are anticipating, the science is preparing us to anticipate some major shifts in the function and composition of our forests and forest loss as a result of climate change. One of the things that science shows is that the kind of work that we're already doing, largely informed by fire behavior science and fuel modeling, but also informed by the natural range of variation for forest composition and structure and how it interacted with climate and fire. That's built into what we're doing right now. We are restoring more resilient conditions in every stand that we treat. And that's resilient to fire, and that's resilient in some degree to climate change. There are a number of studies going on, and the Nature Conservancy and others are involved in them to begin to model out more explicitly what we can expect across an array of different forest types in different settings, in different parts of the region and the West and the world, to try to figure out how to turn the dial and adjust the lens to sharpen the focus in our prescriptions on climate adaptation. I think some of the key things that we do right now that will fit the prescriptions we can anticipate is we have a heavy emphasis on trying to restore and retain the existing hardwood component, especially of black oaks and white oaks if they're there in these stands, because they are inherently better adapted to longer, hotter summers than, say, the conifers in the mix. We tend to focus on the trees, the conifers, for example, that have greater tolerance for the warmer, drier conditions. So given a choice between a ponderosa pine and a Douglas fir to leave for its adaptive capacity in a site that's going to get hotter and drier, our typical preference to leave the ponderosa pine helps facilitate climate adaptation. But there's a lot of really important science coming down the road, and we fully anticipate and embrace the opportunity to work with that science and to adjust the prescriptions as we move forward. But I think we're well covered at this early stage with fairly conservative approaches to climate adaptation built into the prescriptions.
Thank you, Darren. Do any of our other panelists want to chime in on how we are adapting to climate change? Darren had a pretty cohesive answer, so that doesn't surprise me. Terry, I know you answered this in the Q&A box, but for people who may be viewing this webinar in the future and like the work that we're doing and want to support Rogue Forest Partners, is Rogue Forest Partners a 501c3 nonprofit, and how can individual donors support the work that we're doing?
No, Rogue Forest Partners is not a 501c3, but all the member organizations, federal land, there are 4 NGOs. The 4 NGOs are 501c3. And we've been contemplating how donations could go to support some of this work. We think it's feasible. We haven't set it up yet through our website and got it organized. Again, we're starting out here, but we have big ambitions to do a whole lot of work and to work with a whole lot of people across the Rogue Basin. So there are ways to support it. I can't give you a direct answer. Anybody else want to address that?
Sure, I'll give it a little bit of a plug. The 4 NGOs, that would be the Klamath Bird Observatory, the Nature Conservancy, Loma Katsi Restoration Project, and SOFR, Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative, are all nonprofit organizations. We each have our own websites where somebody who's interested could contribute through that website, make a donation to the organization.
All right, and we're running out of time real quick. I think we have time for one more question, and this one is directed to Jamie Stevens. Welcome to the neighborhood in Ashland and the newly constructed Klamath Bird Observatory. Is there a possibility this location will be an information and learning center so as to engage the community with your very interesting sounding work? If not, can you speak a little more about how you engage and inspire participation?
Yeah, thanks for that question. You must have driven by our relatively new office space. We recently moved a little further down the road. So we are currently thinking about outreach in a COVID-safe way. So all of our current outreach right now is happening in the field. And so I'd be happy to follow up with you directly. We have a contact list where we're putting out information about our series. We do regular walks and talks where we do presentations right now virtually, and then have field trips that are associated with those. And we have a number of different outreach programs, some of them associated with our science as well. And I know that this group also is thinking about our upcoming series. And I'm sure that after the numbers that have already been identified as to our upcoming topics, that hopefully after we do our bird monitoring this spring in the Upper Applegate Watershed Project, we'll be able to get back to you guys with some preliminary information about our work specifically with this project as well.
All right, thank you, Jamie. And it's just about time for us to sign off. I wanted to thank everybody for your participation in the webinar today, and a special thank you to those who submitted questions in the Q&A panel. We really appreciate your engagement and curiosity about the work that we're doing and the direction we are headed. I want to make a plug again for our website, rogueforestpartners.org. Go check it out, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, and we will continue this conversation in the future.